So we are now with Associate Professor Stephan Millet of Curtin University of Technology in Perth, Western Australia. He has taught philosophy for children for many years, no? Since kindergarten. We are especially interested in kindergarten because our government is trying to introduce more kindergarten schools in the curriculum because they find that that's a good preparation for schooling. A lot of students who fail or drop out are those who didn't go through preparatory courses like kindergarten.
Yes. The real power of education is in the primary, junior primary. Traditional teaching misses out on dealing with the big questions. Why is the sky blue? Why is there a sky? Why is there something and not nothing? They wake up and they invent their world. Simply going, I wonder, is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for helping kids to engage with their world. So keeping the wonder alive, because it disappears in boys. It starts to disappear about the age of 9 or 10. Just something that we do with the way we educate children. They lose the wonder, and some of it, I think, is the way we teach. If we engage with them as questioners, then they actually have a sense of ownership of the process of creating their world. And that's the theoretical, but what does it look like in practice? Well, that's where you need junior primary teachers to help you. So junior primary is structured play.
How does your Heidegger studies help you in doing philosophy for children?
Heidegger is just one of the influences.
Okay.
The major influence comes out of his work on language and the notion of hearkening.
Okay.
Hearkening is listening,
Yeah.
but it's a certain sort of, it's listening for, not just listening to. With the children, introduce them to the idea that merely hearing isn't listening. But listening is actually a very active thing that they need to do. So trying to encourage them to listen for understanding, to get them to think about how they listen attentively, to listen, and then listening to each other is to get them to listen charitably. That just means that try to understand what somebody might be meaning. So we then move into the Austin and Searle distinction between what I say and what I mean and what is understood. But bringing that back down into practice, and they don't need to know that there's a strand of analytic philosophy of language that deals with those sorts of speech acts. But they do need to understand at a visceral level that language does things, and what they can do with language, either as a sender or as a receiver of language, is open. So what they can do with their language is that they can be respectful to people.
What you were telling me is reminding me about even the phenomenological method.
Yes.
To get back to the things themselves. That's
Very
why
much.
probably when we teach phenomenology to college students, it's like going back to their childhood to see things for the first time.
Well, the process of phenomenological reduction, and interpretation. So yes, we're dealing with hermeneutic phenomenology at a very fundamental level, and that's very consciously one of the tools that I use in keeping the wonder alive. That, I think, is probably the major challenge for all teachers, is to say, well, what's the best way to educate as opposed to teach? Education, educare, is leading into learning. Both are necessary at some stage, but if you only have one or the other, then you get a system, teaching and education system that's out of kilter. The challenge is to get the balance so that teachers are leading at least some of the time.
So that's where you get the balance between authority and subversion.
Yeah.
The authority is in the content, the form is in the form of questioning, is that it?
If you encourage respectful engagement with each other and you model that, so as a teacher, I will engage respectfully with my students, but they can question. They can question the teacher. They can, I respectfully disagree with you, sir, because. That's what the because is necessary. Now, I disagree with you because. And so the teacher does it back to the student, and it's nice and simple, but it's polite. And that, I think, is one of the foundation elements that help to foster democratic environments.
I suppose the way to facilitate that is to do it that way to them too. You know? And is there any other way of shifting this teacher-centered learning to learning of themselves?
There are other ways, yes. There's a range of collaborative learning strategies. You can use things like tribes. The notion of tribes in education theory means that you put your children in groups. Each one of them may be operating on a different task, and they can move around the tasks. But the task is one which, depending on the level of development, has a strong kinesthetic component. So it's a really messy, noisy class. But at the end of it, you know, at any time you can say, right, and they just stop, put their hands up what they're doing, and they pay attention to you, allowing increasing degrees of freedom so that the children self-manage. But autonomy, not as a simple individual, and that's the key to particular techniques in philosophy. It starts to work towards a socialized sense of self, that I am, that there is no ego. It's not radical autonomy. It's a constrained autonomy. What we don't do well is say, well, how can I be deliberate about at what point should I introduce syllogistic logic? And how do I introduce elenchus? Well, elenchus we can do right back in early primary. You don't have to tell them the name.
Maybe for the sake of our audience, can you clarify what elenchus is?
It's a sort of Socratic dialogue. It's the Socrates as the inquisitor, and so guiding people by asking a question, and then taking the response, and then using the question answer. Usually the protagonist, to understand a concept or to understand how little they understand about a concept. So it's a process of concept clarification through question and answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Millet. We look forward to more discussions and probably even implementing the ideas that he has taught us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.